and I am here with the Florida School of Holistic Living. I am a community graduate from the school and a current herbalist who's working with them now, and I am here to talk about Dandelion. And I'm protecting him because it's windy out right now. So we're gonna do a little reveal. Hello, hi beautiful. I was very excited that this morning I came out and he was full head of seeds. But it just got windy out, so I'm trying to make sure that the seeds don't go everywhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about dandelion, and the scientific name for dandelion is Taraxacum. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Taraxacum officinale. There's many different varieties of dandelion. That's the main one. Officinale means that it's the main basic, your basic dandelion, your everyday dandelion. And it's amazing, actually, that I am here in Central Florida in my garden, and this dandelion is growing because dandelions tend to love a more temperate climate, and they like it to be cooler, and they like moist and cool. Actually, they'll pretty much grow anywhere. They don't moist or dry. They love it all, but they aren't too into heat. They don't like the heat very much. So dandelions tend to grow better in northern Florida, but not down here in Central Florida and further beyond. They have a little bit more difficulty. So this dandelion is not quote-unquote native to Florida, but dandelions are not necessarily native to anywhere. They are everywhere, all over all 6 continents, and I believe they grow everywhere but Antarctica. It's a little too cold in Antarctica for them. They're not liking it so much in Antarctica. But in more temperate climates, you know springtime is on us when you see these beautiful, beautiful green leaves of dandelion coming up from the ground. And in places like I was recently in Wisconsin in the springtime after the snow has melted, and the entire lawn was covered with these little yellow heads. And I hope here that our lovely assistant and videographer Rita Sotolongo, who is taking this video, will be able to show you some of the actual yellow heads, because this one was yellow a few days ago, but it has now become seed, and this one was also yellow a few days ago. You can see here, and it's closing up and is making his little seeds to spread all over the yard. And that is actually one of the reasons I keep protecting him, because I don't want the seeds growing all over the yard. I have him growing in a bed, so he doesn't grow wild down here so easily. But we know dandelion, generally speaking, as a weed. We think of dandelion as a lawn weed. And dandelion has a very, very long history of that, and I'll get into that in a second. But let's look at the plant first. So, the leaves, as you can see here, grow from a rosette. So they all grow. Can you get in there? Right down to the bottom, and they grow from the center, right out of the ground. So there's no actual stem to the leaf. The leaf grows in a rosette pattern directly from the ground. Here, you can get a really good vision of it there. And you see all the little tiny leaves in the center? And they grow on these long leaf stems, and they're extremely dentate, right? So they're heavily toothed all the way across, and there's tiny little teeth, and then larger teeth that go out like this, almost like multiple arrows. And the name dandelion comes from the French Dandelion, which means lion's teeth. So Dandelion is from the French, lion's teeth. And it's said, there's a couple of different reasons they say this. One reason they say it's because it looks like lion's teeth, like the big teeth of the lion. So of course, that's one of the reasons they say that name comes to it. And the other reason they say is because it is lion's tooth, in that it is a strong plant. It is an extremely powerful plant that has a lot of medicinal qualities to it. So we'll talk about all of those in a moment. All of the parts of the plants are edible, including the root. And this plant is propagated by cloning. So it does not need bees to be pollinated. It doesn't need any pollinators. Each one of these little seeds is a clone of the parent plant. So when this seed head comes up from the stem like this, and then it makes this beautiful little puffball of joy, I always like to call it. Each one of these seeds, when it lands somewhere, will make another dandelion exactly like it. So it doesn't need to be pollinated between two plants. It's asexual. So that is one way that you'll get a lot of dandelions. Each seed head grows, I believe, 54 to 176 seeds per seed head. And each plant per year can make up to 5,000 seeds. So when you wonder why there's so many dandelions in the world, it's because it's a very happy little plant. Making lots of little dandelions. Those seeds, when they land, they tend to like disturbed areas. So you'll see them a lot in construction sites, on roadsides. You'll see them in industrial wastelands. Any place where there's barren land, cropland, agricultural land, they grow everywhere like that because they like that empty soil in order to land and grow. So I think that's also one of the reasons. There's the heat reason, but also Florida, like my yard is very lush, mostly lush with other weeds. But even those weeds make it difficult for the dandelion to land in undisturbed soil. The other reason that dandelions are so prolific is that their root is mostly a tap root, which goes straight down and tapers down. Sometimes it'll be branched, but mostly it's a long, straight root. That root can get so long and so deep that this plant can live up to 13 years. So when you harvest a dandelion and you harvest the leaves, usually in the springtime, you want to harvest them in the springtime. When you cut them back, the root will still stay and it will grow back the next spring, usually up to about 13 years. One of the reasons it's so difficult to get rid of in lawns is because you only need a tiny little piece of that taproot for the dandelion to grow back. So you can spray the dandelion, you can keep spraying the dandelion, and if you don't get the entire taproot up and out or kill it all the way down to deep into the soil, this dandelion will keep coming back. And unfortunately, dandelion is one of the main reasons we have such strong weed killers in the world. And I will also be getting into the weed killing in a second. The yellow is an inflorescence. So it's not just one big flower, it's a bunch of tiny little flowers. Why you have so many seeds. So we have the stem. The stem is the only part of the dandelion. Obviously, you don't really want to eat the seeds either because those are just going to not be delicious. The stem, you don't want to eat the stem. And you can see it has a little bit of a milky white sap. And in folk medicine, this sap has been known to be used for warts, to put on warts. This particular dandelion that I have is not terribly, as they would say, juicy, but yeah. So this you would not eat, but you could use it for something like that. The plant itself, like I said, if you cut it back, you can grow it, not grow it, it'll keep growing back. The leaves, generally, if you want to make a tea, are harvested in the springtime. These are a little bit late. Of course, Florida springtime is, I think, 3 days long, maybe.
Have a spring, or do
I don't think we really have a spring. Yeah. Or what is the joke is, what are the seasons in Florida? January, February, and summer.
Yep.
So that's what we're in summer already. So, but to harvest the leaves, you would just go all the way down to the bottom and cut them down at the bottom. I'm going to take some of these, and then you can see too better the shape of the leaf. You can actually harvest them later. They're better for cooking. Like, if you harvest them later, they're better to be cooked. But you can dry them and use them as tea. I have some here. This is a little bit old because you want it to be a little bit greener if you can. But generally, dandelion tea, you can steep it. You can cut the fresh tea leaves, cut them up, put them in a jar, add hot water, let them steep. This is a very bitter plant. It is an extremely bitter plant. Bitter plants are known for their ability to help with digestion. When you eat a bitter plant, it automatically goes to your gallbladder and says, bile, something is coming into my body that I need to process better. And that bile helps clean out your liver. It helps, when you put the bitter flavor in your mouth, you start to salivate, and that salivation is already putting enzymes into your mouth that help to break down your food before you've even eaten it. So when you can get those enzymes going in your food, when you get those enzymes going in your mouth from eating bitter foods, that helps your digestion. This plant has been used as a food, as a nutrient before recorded history. This plant has been around for, they say, at least, 30,000 years or something like that. Maybe more, I don't know. And like I was saying earlier, it grows on all 6 continents, every place but Antarctica. And because it's so prolific and it moves around so easily and it propagates itself so easily, it is not a plant that is generally cultivated. So this plant was very, very important to our ancestors, particularly in Eurasia. It is known in traditional Chinese medicine. It has been written about to help with digestion, to help with inflammation, to help with skin eruptions, to assist the body in moving toxins and water out. So this is a highly diuretic plant, meaning that the water, it helps to move water out of your body. So one of the names for this plant, there's lots of different names for this plant. One of them is pissenlit. The French apparently love this plant more than anything because all of our names for this plant come from the French. Pissenlit, which means piss the bed. So it will help you move water and in turn toxins out of your body. So utilizing this plant as a tea, obviously when you're drinking tea, it goes into your system really quickly. It can be used as a food. Let's see. So yeah, it's over 30 million years old, not 30,000, and beginning in Eurasia. And this plant, in the history of this plant, it is pretty much the quintessential mascot for colonization. Let's just put it that way. This plant, as soon as it has an empty space and it can go somewhere and make itself spread out and take over, it will. It knows what it's doing. This plant is really good at colonizing. So, but that basically, the way this plant shows up in the world, because it does prefer disturbed and empty sites, is a great way of seeing the spread of a plant as also the spread of human civilization. So the more that people move around and the more they cut down forests to build towns, the more that they broke ground to build cities, the more that they invested their time and energy into agriculture and had to clear the land to grow crops, this plant showed up. And up until more recently, it was revered as medicine. You can eat the flowers. The flowers can be used as fritters. You can cook them. You can take the petals and put them in salads. Dandelion Wine is a famous wine. I personally don't like it. It was one of my grandmother's favorites. She's like, oh, I love my dandelion wine. And I'm like, I don't like it. It's a little too sweet for me. But it does have sort of a nutty, vanilla-y flavor. You can use the flowers in jelly. You can eat them in all different sorts of ways. And people have been eating them like that for a very, very long time. The leaves, obviously, have been eaten. You can put them in salad. You can just chop them up and eat them fresh. As they grow so close to the ground, you want to make sure to wash them off really well because the dirt is right there. They go right out of the dirt. So just clean them really well, eat them fresh. Would you like to taste one?
Sure.
And let me know what you think. We're going to eat one together and see how bitter it really is. Yeah.
That is bitter.
It's pretty bitter. When you're harvesting them, it's best to harvest them for salads before they flower. After they flower, the leaves become tough and bitter. However, that does not make them inedible. My grandmother loved dandelion greens. Again, that's before they flower. But if you cut them down, you leave the root in, you'll keep getting dandelion, which is amazing. My family is Mediterranean, so it's Italy. And in Italy, in Greece and Italy, this plant has a very, very long history. Romans ate it often in salad. My grandmother always sauteed it and cooked it. So that was one way that we often had dandelion greens. When I was a little kid, obviously I'm a child and I'm like, no, I don't want to eat that. But as I've gotten older, I truly enjoyed the sauteed dandelion green with a lot of garlic and some hot pepper. And the amazing thing about that is you get to add a lot of other medicinal plants to your repertoire when you're cooking dandelion greens. So the Romans use it, the Greeks use it. It's written in Arabic texts from like 10,000 years ago. Egypt, they also use dandelion. In the oldest medicinal texts in Arabic, the name for it was taraxacum, which means bitter herb. And in Greece, the name for it that they used was, I'm going to see if I can get it right, taraxacos, which means basically disorder and remedy. So the tarax was disorder and the akos was remedy. So they knew, without knowing that it is full of vitamins and full of minerals and has all sorts of different nutrients within this plant, they already knew that it was a remedy. You can hear it in the name of disorder and remedy and bitter herb. So the history of this plant goes back a long way. I want to check my notes on something and make sure I'm saying those names right. Taraxacos, yes. And taraxacum. And of course, as we know it, the scientific name is taraxacum. So this is where it comes from. That is where the name comes from, the taraxacum. One of my favorite little stories about dandelion in mythology is in Greek mythology, and it is said that Hecate, the goddess of the underworld, fed dandelion to Theseus for 30 days in order to give him enough strength to fight the Minotaur. So eat your dandelion greens every day and you'll be fighting beasts left and right. That's all I have to say. Just dandelion all the time. Another part of the plant that is also eaten, which I can't show you here because I'm not going to pull it up, but let's see if we can dig up and see if we can even see the head of the root maybe. I just like getting my hands dirty. Yep, he's got a decent sized root in there. I apologize if there's a lot of noise in the background. My neighbors are doing all sorts of construction. And I look forward to also doing construction soon too. So they'll get their payback. Don't you guys worry. Okay. So yeah, there's a big root down there. This root, you can see here, the root has like a brown skin to it. This one is branched out a little bit. Go. So normally it has like a taproot, but this one has a little branching to it. I'm going to cover you back up. Sorry guys. So dandelion root, the leaves as well, but more so the root, are extremely high in inulin. Can you see that? I'm going to help read it out here. My thin root. This plant is only not even a year old yet, so this is just a little baby. Little baby offshoot root. So generally speaking, the root will get really, really big and fat. It can be up to like an inch or more wide, and you can eat them like any other root vegetable. They're high in what's known as inulin, which is a prebiotic. So the inulin in the root helps to feed bacteria in your microbiome. So your microbiome, as some of you know, is all of the little bacteria and yeast and fungi and all of the little things that aren't you that live inside of your body that help you process food, help you from getting sick, help boost your immune system. They also help with mood elevation. If you have a really good microbiome, a large percentage of your serotonin is in your gut. So helping your microbiome is important and keeping that really super healthy. So dandelion root is a great way to help feed that microbiome. So different ways that you can cook it. You can kind of take off the outer part of it. You can chop it up. You can make it into a tea. A lot of people roast it and use it as a coffee substitute, and that's super common. You can actually go to the store, especially if you live in Central Florida or further south. You're not going to have access to dandelion just lying around in your yard so much. Up north, you can take a hori hori, or they make these special. I don't have one because I never do this here, but there's a long metal rod with two prongs at the end, and you can stick it into the ground right next to the plant, and then tick it like this and pull the whole root up. And then you can eat the greens and the root and everything. You can roast it and make it into a coffee substitute, which I love to do. One of my other favorite recipes for dandelion root is to chop it up and boil it. Sometimes I like to put burdock root in there too, which is also really, really good in inulin and helps with skin issues and liver issues. This is amazing for your liver. And to cook it in some maple syrup and water. Maple syrup and water with a little bit like cinnamon. Throw a cinnamon stick in there. You can put like some star anise in there and cook it until it becomes like a thick syrup, and just eat it. Just eat the root. It's absolutely delicious. But again, you can make it into a tea. You can powder it and add it to things. Let's see. I'm gonna just double check on something really quick. So again, both the leaf and the root are high in inulin, and one of the chemical constituents in the root is called there's too many sounds in this word. Taraxesterol, which has been known or has been shown to help with arthritis, osteoarthritis particularly, not necessarily rheumatoid arthritis, which is a different issue. The most important thing, I think, for dandelion root is liver stagnation. So again, it helps with bile. The bitter plant of dandelion helps with bile movement and bile production. And so it helps with poor digestion when you're having difficulty with digestion, particularly fat digestion. If you have a fatty liver, or you have more of a fatty, like a lot of fats in your diet, taking dandelion root is super helpful in helping you process and absorb nutrients, particularly when you're having issues with fat. It's balancing. It's extremely balancing. It helps with hormones. So people who have severe PMS syndromes, it's been known to support the body in that way, because anything that's moving the liver is also helping to move toxins out of your body. And when you're helping move toxins out of your body, some of your toxins also include your own hormones. So dandelion root can be really helpful for that. Again, bile, thick bile, gallbladder issues, any sort of like anything that has to do with bile production or recycling. Again, high in inulin. It is cooling and draining. So this plant tends to be cooling and drying. The flowers actually tend to be more moistening, but the plant itself is cool, dry, salty, and bitter. So cooling and drying is going to help you with hot and damp and stagnant issues in your system. Yeah. He's also cute, isn't he? He's awfully cute. I do like him a lot. I'm gonna have to go inside and make some tea now that I'm sorry I took some of your root. He and I had a long conversation about this before Rita came over to film, so I think we're doing okay. Let's see. So you can eat the root as you would any other root vegetable. You can roast them or dry them. Another way to use dandelion, both the leaf and the root, is you can tincture them. You can put them in vinegars, and the vinegar or alcohol tincture will pull a lot of the constituents out of the plant, and then you can take it that way if you prefer. I personally love the concept, Hippocrates, food is medicine. So eating the dandelion regularly to me is really the most joyful way of ingesting this plant. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful plant that way. It's interesting that our ancestors lived so heartily on this plant. And how did it even end up in North America when it comes... Rita's still eating it. She's very brave. She's like, I'm trying to help my liver right now. I really want to help my liver right now. So how did this plant come to North America? It's a long way off, obviously, from Eurasia and the Mediterranean. And again, any place humans moved, this plant came with it. So European settlers brought this plant over with them from Europe. And again, some people say that it just came as part of the hay or part of the fodder that they were using for their animals. Some people say that they actually brought it with them because it was such an important plant, medicinally, food-wise. When you have a plant that is so prolific that you don't have to worry about if it's going to grow or how it's going to grow, you just know that you put that plant there and it will be there for you no matter what. That's a really potent thing when you're going to a place where you have no idea if you're going to survive when you get there. So having this plant for all of the parts of it, for the root, for the tea, for the food, for the flowers, for the beauty of the plant, was so important to Europeans to bring it here. And then of course it spread the more that they moved land around to make farms and moved things around to make farms. And it is said that there are probably species of this plant that were already here on this continent that were not necessarily officinale, because there are lots of different types of it, mostly interchangeable as far as I understand. So having this plant on the ship and bringing it over here, of course, when it spread around, the First Nations people and the indigenous people who already lived on this continent saw it and also started using it. It's not that all plants, it became naturalized here in the North America, and again, it exists. The plant's smart. Plants are smarter than we give them credit for, and the plant spread and has helped a lot of people, both medicinally speaking and survival speaking and food speaking. As I said, it doesn't really grow here in Florida after zone 9, I think, 9A-ish. Like, I know I have friends up in Ocala who grow it a little bit more readily than I can. But more importantly, how did it become a weed? How did dandelion become if you go to the store and look at a bottle of weed killer, what you will see is inevitably a drawing or a photograph of a dandelion. And how could something that was thought to be such a beautiful plant, whose flowers were used for dye, to dye robes, and to be used as a way to make beauty and to keep us so strong and healthy, become this pernicious weed that we hate? So I was doing a little bit of research on this. I was trying to figure, I was like, how did that happen? And I found this guy on the internet, I believe his name is The History Guy, and I was watching his video and I was like, what? Of course. According to him, in the 17th century, the English, particularly the English the wealthy English aristocracy, decided that lawns were the thing. We wanted this perfectly vast expanse of greenness that is open, that we can, see our domain very easily without having to look through a lot of trees. And because we're wealthy, we don't need to cultivate our land. Our land doesn't need to feed us. We just need a long, large expanse of grass that is basically doesn't have any use other than being beautiful. That's it. And so as soon as this vast expanse of greenness became a thing for the wealthy, dandelion became the absolute bane of a gardener, an English gardener's existence. And so getting rid of dandelion was the thing that you did. I believe that it was Thomas Jefferson. He mentioned that Thomas Jefferson saw this and decided that he was going to bring this back to the United States and developed a lawn on Monticello. And then, of course, after the Civil War, when the rise of industrialization came around and people were starting to be able to have homes again and settle in places, the lawn became even more important. And then, of course, post-war, in World War II, with the nuclear family and each person having their own little plot of land, and the American dream of being wealthy and having this space became such a thing, having a perfect front lawn and having all of your neighbors match you and everyone being the same became a thing. And so dandelion became the mascot of the worst. And we no longer saw them as this beautiful, nutritious plant. And then, of course, when we began developing painkillers, this was around, I was saying, after World War II. I don't remember the first name of the first painkiller, I apologize. But they became these severely strong toxins that you put across. It didn't kill grass, but it killed broadleaf plants. So you were killing not only your dandelion, but you were killing all the other broadleaf plants in your yard. So, huge problem for this wonderful little guy here. I always used to say when I had a lawn in Chicago and I get in trouble all the time for having weeds in my lawn, I'd say, if it's green, it belongs here. So, I always did my best to take care of these guys. And of course, I ate them as food and I let the roots grow. And I was constantly making my grandmother's dishes and bringing a little bit of my old world medicine with me into the kitchen. There are a few, like I said, if you're in Central Florida, you're not going to see so much of the dandelion growing around. But if you are going to harvest any of it, the best time to harvest the leaf, again, is in the springtime, which we don't really have in Florida so much. Before the plant flowers, is the best time to harvest it for less bitter. If you're going to eat it in a salad, it was a very popular Roman and French thing, and you eat a little tiny bit of dandelion salad before you have dinner, and that helps your digestion before you eat, just like a little bit of it to get all of that flowing. Sometimes they would eat it as a digestif afterwards. Italians eat this, they saute it and eat it, again, also in salads, but you can use the more hardier, older greens if you're going to saute them. There is a class that will be on demand, I believe, through the Florida School of Holistic Living. Is this correct? That we're going to be doing it on demand, the kitchen series? Yes. So there's a kitchen medicine series through the Florida School of Holistic Medicine. And that class, I teach a class on garlic. And in that class, I actually cook dandelion green. So you can see the recipe for that and see the rundown on how to do that. And sometimes bitter is a little much for people, right? So one of the ways, if you want to eat dandelion and you want to cut that bitterness a little bit, is to add a little bit of honey or some sort of sweetener to it. You don't want to completely get rid of the bitter because the bitter is the medicine, right? Sometimes the poison is the medicine. So the bitter is the medicine. But to cut that a little bit, some sort of dressing that has like lemon and a little bit of honey in it, vinegar with a little bit of honey in it, and oxymel, which is a mixture of like herbed vinegar and herbed honey together, is really, really lovely on dandelion. So you would want to harvest the leaves earlier in the spring or before the flower. And then, of course, the root is actually best in the fall, to pull it out in the fall, because once the top of the plant kind of dies back in the fall, getting ready to like overwinter, that's when all the nutrients go down into the root. So if you want all the nutrients with the root, you're not gonna pull it up when it's nice and green like this. You're gonna want it in the fall when all of the top of the plant has died off. Then you can pull the root out, and then you'll have more nutrients in the root at that time. I'm trying to think.
Would you like to show us, you said you have examples of false dandelions?
I don't have any false dandelion in my yard, but I do have one that people often, I've been sitting in the same position for far too long. One plant that people sometimes get confused with dandelion, it's called false hawksbeard, which is Japonica, Youngia japonica, and I have a couple little ones over here. We just recently weeded my yard, so there's some here growing in my unfortunate azalea. And here you can see it's similar to a dandelion. It has this little yellow, but it's tiny and it has a lot. The dandelion is going to have one stem with one flower, and you can see this has a lot of little ones. But the leaves on it are similar in shape. They have that little dentate thing here that grow up, and they all come from a bottom rosette like this. This is also edible. You can put them, they usually tend to be better as a pot herb than as a fresh green, because they're sometimes a little bit harder to process. So if you were gonna pull those up, I would cook them first. You can even add them to your dandelion saute if you're sauteing dandelion. A couple of things to know about dandelion is there's not really any known contraindications for it. However, if you are allergic to any plants in the Asteraceae family, so plants like daisies or chicory, any of those kinds of plants, like if you're the kind of person who does a lot of sneezing during the season when all the seeds are out because of Asteraceae, you might want to be careful with dandelion because you might have a little bit of a reaction to that. And of course, the most important thing, which is what we were just talking about with lawns and pesticides, and the fact that dandelions grow in more industrial places that have a lot of waste. That plant, that root, we know that root is very deep into the ground, and that plant will suck in all the pesticides and all of the toxins. So if you're using a plant to get rid of toxins, you want to make sure that you're not eating a plant from a toxic place. So it's very, very important if you're foraging for dandelion wherever you live to know your land, to know if the people on that land spray, if there's any sort of industrial waste that has been on that land before the dandelions were growing there. They do grow wild. There are places where you can get them where it's not so rough, but yeah, you just want to make sure that you're being careful with where you get them. You can also go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of dandelions. So you can get huge bunches of dandelion at the grocery store. At my local produce market, in the springtime usually, I can get like a big huge bunch of them and cook those up. 9 times out of 10 they come from Canada. We grow dandelions here, but apparently not enough people in America want to grow dandelions to sell them. So all my dandelions come from Canada. It's the French thing. I think it's the French thing. French. I love the dandelions.
Well, maybe that they have stricter laws up there about pesticides and stuff.
They might too. Yeah. It's just easier their land. If they were growing it all the time, because they tended to be more in line with that, with their European ancestor thing, then there's less likelihood that there's pesticides in it and stuff like that. Although I have to say that the dandelions I buy at the store are massive, so that makes me think that they're using something to make them bigger. There's always something, isn't there? So
that's why it's best to grow it in your backyard where you know
what you're getting. Yeah, it's just the dandelions. I don't know. I often wonder about plant movement, right? Plants are moving. Plants go to wherever they can grow. And even though generally speaking they don't grow here, I've noticed that with climate change things are shifting. So there are plants. I was recently in Mead Garden and saw a huge plantain, like a broadleaf plantain, and I'm like, what are you doing here? How did you get here? Because they generally don't grow down here. So it was very exciting. And also like interesting.
There's some that Emily has mentioned on recent plant walks that when she first lived here had very set times of year that they would bloom, and now she's noticing 15 years later that they're blooming a lot more, a lot longer at different times of the year than they ever did before.
Yep. Things are changing.
Yes.
And I have mixed feelings about like the native thing, because what does it mean to be native somewhere? Because if I understand, like, you want to make sure that whatever plant you're bringing in isn't taking over so that other plants that grow here can't. So that's why I was really careful with the seeds on my dandelion, because dandelion doesn't traditionally grow here, and I don't want him taking over to the point where my other plants who do belong here don't have a space to thrive and live. However, a lot of the plants that we now think of as naturalized here aren't actually native, even though those are the ones that I'm trying to protect. I'm not native to here. Most of my people are not native to here. So it's learning how to balance it so that you're taking care of your environment and the plants and each other in that turn. So.
And I wanted to ask,
yes.
Speaking of that, because you mentioned that it's on 6 continents.
Yes.
Okay, and that it traveled. Do we have any idea, any indication of where it may have originated? At least even a region of the world.
They say Eurasia, so that continent. So some people say it was the Mediterranean, but I think that's because that area with the Arabic texts and Egyptian texts and Roman Greek texts, they'll say that because that's the first place that we have written language about it.
Yep.
That does not mean that that is the first place it grew. It just means that that's where we have the written
documentation.
So one of the places that was heavily known to be used was like in Wales. So dandelion's a very heavy like Welsh plant. So perhaps further east. It's also known very heavily in China. So where dandelion actually sprouted, from whence dandelion sprouted, it's all conjecture. At this point, people existed far long before written, and they traveled the world far before they were writing anything down.
And even the people who were writing it down, there's tens of thousands of years of oral tradition behind when we first sat down and decided, hey, we know how to write now, we should probably write this down.
Yeah. And sometimes we didn't even then. So, yeah, we have to, this concept of pre-civilization that's obvious for actual living, survival, and being human. Yeah. So I want to thank all of you for coming to my yard today and spending time with me on this blustery, what up north is a spring day. And down here, actually it was very chilly this morning. I was quite excited. I was like, oh, it is like spring. So thank you for coming to my yard. And again, check out the other videos on this YouTube site and please subscribe. We have lots of good information. And of course, the Florida School of Holistic Living has amazing classes. And we have herbal consultations as well at our school. And you can check us out online at our website, which will be linked below. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments and we will do our best to answer any questions that you have. And I wish you a wonderful, bright, sunny day. And if I would say, you could go out and blow some dandelion seed heads into the wind and make a wish, because it's a lovely thing to do.